The bailiff's hand clamped onto her elbow before her second step reached the defense table. "Ma'am, you can't stand there," he hissed, guiding her toward the aisle like she was a spill that needed mopping up. His fingers tightened when she didn't immediately move fast enough. She didn't fight him. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at the hand on her arm, calm, steady, the way someone looks at a weapon they've already learned how to disarm. The judge leaned forward over the bench, robe draped like a shadow. Judge Harold Ketteridge was a thick-necked man with a jaw that never softened and eyes that never apologized. His gavel sat in front of him like a loaded threat. "Ms.," he drawled, peering at the docket as if it annoyed him to read. "Ms. Naomi Carter." Naomi stood in the center of the courtroom aisle, her coat still on, a plain wool thing with rain-darkened shoulders. She held a worn folder against her chest. Her hair was pulled back, neat, practical. She looked like someone who rode a bus to get here. Judge Ketteridge's mouth twitched. "You're late." "The bus was delayed," she said quietly. A snort escaped him, audible, deliberate. It traveled through the courtroom and landed on her, like spit. A few people in the gallery shifted. Someone chuckled under their breath, then tried to hide it when the judge's eyes flicked their way. "You're in court," Ketteridge said. "Not a church picnic. Time matters here. Do you understand that?" "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice was even. It didn't beg. It didn't bristle. That was the first thing that irritated him. Her refusal to perform fear. The prosecutor, a young man with a clean haircut and a smug mouth, stood. "Your Honor, State v. Carter. Defendant is charged with contempt and disturbance at the county clerk's office." She refused to leave, raised her voice, and threatened staff. Naomi's fingers tightened on her folder. The words were inaccurate in a way that felt practiced. Judge Ketteridge looked her up and down slowly, the way men sometimes did when they thought the room belonged to them. "You were making a scene at the clerk's office?" "I was requesting records," she said. "Public records." The prosecutor's smile widened. She was demanding them, yelling, calling employees corrupt. Naomi's eyes moved to the prosecutor, then to the clerk seated near the court reporter. The clerk avoided her gaze, busying herself with papers that weren't there. Ketteridge leaned back. "Ms. Carter, you understand that public employees are not your punching bags." "I didn't touch anyone," Naomi said. "That's not what I asked." Ketteridge replied, sharp. "You people always skip over the point and then act confused." The words "you people" hung in the air, heavy and dirty. Naomi didn't react outwardly. Her lips stayed closed, but one muscle in her jaw moved. A quiet flex. Her court-appointed attorney, a pale woman with tired eyes named Diane Lowell, rose halfway as if to speak. Ketteridge cut her off with a raised hand. "I've read your motions, Miss Lowell," he said, "and I've decided they're a waste of ink." Lowell swallowed and sat back down, cheeks flushing. Naomi turned her head slightly toward her attorney, then back to the bench. She didn't look betrayed. She looked like she had expected exactly this. Ketteridge tapped the docket. "Contempt and disturbance. You're lucky you're not charged with assault. The clerk's office is not a protest zone." Naomi's voice stayed level. "I wasn't protesting. I requested a certified copy of a property lien release filed under my late father's name. It was marked restricted. That's not a category for that record." The prosecutor lifted an eyebrow as if amused. "She's playing lawyer, Your Honor." Ketteridge's lips curled. "She's playing something?" The bailiff shifted behind Naomi, close enough that she could feel his breath. Ketteridge leaned forward again, voice slow and cruelly patient. "Ms. Carter, if you have a problem with how things are done, you file paperwork. You don't storm into an office and accuse people of crimes." "I did file paperwork," Naomi said. 3 times. It was rejected. Each time, the rejection notice had no reason. The judge laughed once, a sharp bark. "And you thought the solution was to raise your voice and intimidate clerks?" "I didn't intimidate anyone." Ketteridge's eyes narrowed. "You're doing it right now with that tone." Naomi blinked. "With what tone?" "With that attitude," Ketteridge snapped, as if the word burned him. "That look you people get, like everyone owes you something." The court reporter's fingers paused for half a second, then resumed typing faster. Naomi's folder shifted against her chest, as if she were holding herself together with paper. Lowell stood again, forced. "Your Honor, I'd like to make a record." The defendant denies making threats. The arrest report is inconsistent. And Ketteridge slammed the gavel once. The crack echoed. I am the record, he said. Sit down. Lowell sat, hands trembling slightly as she folded them on the table like a child pretending not to cry. Naomi turned her head to Lowell, just a fraction. It's fine, she murmured, so softly it barely moved the air. The prosecutor stepped closer. The state is prepared to offer a plea. 30 days suspended, 6 months probation, and a no trespass order from the clerk's office. Ketteridge nodded as if he'd already decided. Take it, Ms. Carter. That's the best deal you'll ever get with your history. Naomi's eyes lifted. What history? Ketteridge's gaze flicked to the file. Oh, don't play innocent. I see the prior traffic violation. Failure to appear. And now you're here, wasting court time. Naomi's lips parted. I paid that ticket. The failure to appear was because the notice went to the wrong address. I have proof. Of course you do, Ketteridge said, dripping sarcasm. Everyone has proof. Everyone's a victim. Everyone's got some excuse. Naomi lowered her gaze briefly, then looked up again, something steady and restrained behind her eyes. Your Honor, I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for the court to compel the clerk's office to release the lien document. It's tied to my family's home. The prosecutor chuckled. This isn't civil court. She's trying to hijack a criminal proceeding to get her paperwork. Ketteridge smirked as if entertained. Miss Carter, do you know where you are? I'm in County Courtroom 3, Naomi said. And do you know who I am? Yes, she replied. Judge Harold Ketteridge. He pointed at her with one thick finger. Then you know I don't do demands. I don't do theatrics. And I don't do disrespect. Naomi breathed in, slow, controlled. I haven't disrespected you. Ketteridge leaned in, voice lowering. Dangerous. You walked in late, you argued, and you're still standing like you own the damn floor. The bailiff shifted again, hand hovering near Naomi's arm. A reminder. A warning. Naomi looked down at the bailiff's hand. Then she stepped back half a foot, creating space without asking permission. The bailiff's face tightened, as if he didn't like losing that control. Ketteridge noticed. His eyes sharpened. You think you're clever? No, Naomi said. I think you do, he replied, and his voice hardened. Take the plea, or I'll make sure you learn what happens to people who come into my courtroom thinking they can challenge authority. Naomi's attorney leaned toward her, whispering urgently. Naomi, please, take it. 30 days suspended. Just take it, he's not in a mood. Naomi didn't look at her attorney. Her eyes stayed on the judge. I can't accept a no trespass order, Naomi said. Ketteridge tilted his head. Why? Because the clerk's office is where the record is, she answered. And because the no trespass order would prevent me from accessing documents I'm entitled to. You're entitled to nothing, Ketteridge snapped. A quiet murmur rolled through the gallery. Not loud, enough to be felt. The judge's gaze swept the room and the murmur died. Naomi's shoulders rose slightly as she inhaled. Then she did something small, almost unnoticeable. She slid her worn folder onto the defense table and unclipped it. The papers inside were crumpled. They were organized. Tabbed, labeled with precise handwriting. Ketteridge's eyes flicked to them. He didn't like that either preparation. It implied she had planned for this moment. What's that? He demanded. My documents, Naomi said. Keep them closed, he ordered. This isn't your little project. Naomi's fingers hovered over the top page. Your Honor, may I speak? Ketteridge's laugh returned, cold. You've been speaking. That's the problem. Lowell stood, voice cracking with forced professionalism. Your Honor, my client is requesting the opportunity to address the plea and… No, Ketteridge said. I've heard enough. He turned to the prosecutor. State's offer stands. If she refuses, I'll set bail at $10,000 and remand her. Lowell's face drained. $10,000? Your Honor, she has no prior criminal convictions. She's employed. She has community ties. Ketteridge's eyes didn't soften. Then she can ask her community to pay. Naomi's hand stayed on the table. Her posture stayed straight, but her eyes shifted for the first time past the judge toward the court clerk's desk. The clerk was a middle-aged woman with thin lips and a nervous habit of licking them. She stared at her monitor like it was a lifeboat. Naomi spoke again, calm. The clerk's office flagged the lien release as restricted because it contains a signature from a county official who should not have been involved. That official's name is Ketteridge's gavel slammed again. Stop. The courtroom went still. Ketteridge stood slightly, leaning forward, robe falling open at the sides. His face was red now. You are not going to sit there and accuse county employees of corruption in my courtroom. Naomi didn't flinch. I'm not accusing. I'm stating what's in the record. You don't have the record, Ketteridge snapped. Naomi's eyes didn't move. I do. The prosecutor's smile faltered, just a crack. Ketteridge's jaw tightened. No, you don't. And if you keep pushing, you will leave here in cuffs. The bailiff's hand finally landed on Naomi's shoulder. Ma'am, he murmured, voice low, threatening without needing volume. Naomi looked at him. She didn't glare. She didn't plead. She simply met his eyes like she had time, and he didn't. Remove your hand, she said softly. The bailiff blinked, surprised by the certainty. Ketteridge snapped. Bailiff, remove her if she continues. Naomi's voice stayed quiet. I will not resist. Ketteridge's eyes narrowed. Oh, how noble. The prosecutor stepped forward, eager again. Your Honor, given her continued defiance, the state moves for immediate remand. Lowell shot up. Your Honor, this is escalating unnecessarily. Ketteridge's gavel cracked. Enough. Miss Carter, do you accept the plea? Naomi inhaled, slow. No. A hush fell. The kind of hush that comes right before something breaks. Ketteridge's mouth tightened into a line. Then bailiff said at $10,000, remand. The bailiff tightened his grip. Naomi didn't move. She didn't fight, but she didn't collapse either. As the bailiff pulled her arm behind her, Naomi turned her head slightly and spoke toward the clerk's desk. Voice still controlled. Before you take me, she said, the court should know there is a federal litigation hold on those clerks' records. Destroying or concealing them is a felony. The prosecutor barked a laugh, too loud, too quick. She's bluffing. Ketteridge's eyes flashed. Federal, Ms. Metteridge, Carter, you watch too much television. Naomi's eyes stayed steady. It's not a bluff. The bailiff paused, just a heartbeat, because the word federal hit him like a sudden temperature drop. He looked to the judge, waiting for permission to ignore it. Ketteridge took the pause as an insult. Move her. Naomi's wrists were pulled together. Cold metal snapped shut around them. The sound of cuffs in a courtroom had a way of changing everything, even when people pretended it didn't. Naomi's folders slid on the table, papers rustling. As she was guided toward the side door, she spoke again, not loud, just clear. My name is Naomi Carter, she said, and I'm the complainant in United States v. Ketteridge. The words hit the air like a thrown glass. The bailiff stopped dead. Lowell froze, mouth slightly open. The prosecutor's face went blank, as if his brain had refused to translate. Judge Ketteridge's expression tightened, then turned into a smirk so forced it looked painful. That's enough. Naomi turned her head toward him, cuffs glinting. It's public. The complaint was filed under seal last month. It was unsealed yesterday morning. Ketteridge's smirk faltered, and in the brief crack, something ugly showed recognition. Not of her, exactly, but of danger. You are lying, he said too quickly. Naomi's gaze didn't move. Ask your clerk to check the federal docket. The courtroom clerk's eyes widened, flicking to Ketteridge, then down to her keyboard as if it might burn her fingers. Ketteridge's face reddened. No one is checking anything. This is my courtroom. Naomi's voice stayed steady. Not anymore. The prosecutor recovered first, stepping forward as if to reclaim the script. Your Honor, she's trying to intimidate the court. That statement alone is contempt. Ketteridge nodded hard, grateful for the lifeline. Add contempt. 30 days, no, 60. Remand. Lowell finally found her voice, shaky. Your Honor, if there is a pending federal case, there isn't, Ketteridge snapped. Naomi's eyes moved to Lowell. Ms. Meters. Lowell, she said softly, you're going to want to sit down and listen carefully. Something in her tone made Lowell obey without understanding why. Naomi looked back at the judge. Judge Ketteridge, You mocked me because you assumed I was powerless. The clerk's office incident was recorded. The body cameras, the lobby cameras, and the clerk's office phone system. Ketteridge leaned forward, voice low, venomous. You think you're going to threaten me with cameras? Naomi's gaze was unwavering. No, I'm explaining how evidence works. Ketteridge's hand clenched near the gavel. Bailiff, take her. The bailiff didn't move. It was a small rebellion, a hesitation, but it was visible. Ketteridge's eyes snapped to him. Did you hear me? The bailiff swallowed, looking torn between fear of the judge and fear of something larger. Your Honor, if she's saying federal doesn't run this courtroom, Ketteridge hissed. Naomi's voice cut through. The FBI runs the hallway outside it. Silence. A door at the back of the courtroom opened with a soft click. Not dramatic, not slammed, just opened. Two men stepped inside, and the air changed instantly. They wore plain suits, not uniforms. One carried a slim briefcase. The other had a posture that was too calm to be security. Behind them, a woman entered wearing a dark blazer, hair pulled tight, expression blank, in a way that only prosecutors got when they were already done pretending. She walked forward with measured steps, stopping just inside the aisle, and held up a badge. Court is in session, Ketteridge snapped, trying to regain control. You can't just. The woman's voice was quiet, firm, and it didn't ask permission. Special Agent Leila Moreno, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The bailiff's hand fell away from Naomi's arm like it had been burned. Ketteridge's face tightened again, but his eyes now flicked, calculating exits. Moreno continued. This court is notified of a federal warrant. The prosecutor stood, stunned. This is inappropriate. You can't interrupt a proceeding. Moreno didn't look at him. We're not interrupting. We're executing. The man with the briefcase stepped forward, opened it, and removed a sealed folder. He handed it to the courtroom clerk, who took it with shaking hands. Moreno's gaze lifted to the bench. Judge Harold Ketteridge, you are ordered to step down from the bench immediately. A gasp rippled through the gallery, louder this time. Ketteridge laughed, a thin, brittle sound. This is outrageous. Moreno's eyes didn't blink. You are under federal investigation for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and deprivation of rights under color of law. The words landed like blows. Ketteridge's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes flicked to the prosecutor, to the bailiff, to anyone who might rise and say this wasn't real. No one moved. Moreno's voice remained calm. Stand. Ketteridge pushed back slightly, as if standing would admit something. I am a sitting judge. Yes, Moreno said. That's why the warrant was signed by a federal magistrate and served in person. Ketteridge's nostrils flared. His gaze found Naomi, still cuffed in the aisle. The humiliation in his eyes was immediate and sharp. You, he spat. You set this up. Naomi didn't respond with triumph. She simply stood there, wrists bound, looking at him like someone watching a structure collapse exactly as engineered. Moreno glanced at Naomi's cuffs. Who cuffed her? The bailiff spoke, voice hoarse. I did. Moreno's eyes narrowed. Remove them, now. The bailiff rushed to comply, fumbling with the key. Ketteridge slammed his hand on the bench. This is my courtroom. You can't order my bailiff, Moreno's voice cut in. You don't have a courtroom anymore. The click of the cuffs opening was quiet, but Naomi's shoulders eased as the metal released. Red marks ringed her wrists. Lowell stood, hands trembling. Ms. Mix, Carter. What is happening? Naomi turned to her attorney, voice soft. You were appointed because they expected me to fold. Lowell swallowed, eyes glossy. Who are you? Naomi didn't answer immediately. Her gaze returned to Moreno. Moreno nodded once, almost imperceptibly, like a confirmation between people who had already spoken in rooms without windows. Naomi faced the bench again. Your Honor, she said, and the words carried a different weight now. You told me I was entitled to nothing. Ketteridge's face was flushed deep, a color that made him look sick. You think you're better than me because you brought feds into my court. Naomi's voice stayed even. No, I think the law is better than you, and I think you forgot that. Moreno stepped forward again. Judge Ketteridge, step down from the bench. Place your hands behind your back. The courtroom went so silent the court reporter's typing sounded obscene. Ketteridge looked around, eyes darting, searching for allies. The prosecutor stared at his own hands. The bailiff avoided eye contact, face pale. Ketteridge's chest rose and fell. "I want my lawyer," Moreno nodded. "You'll get one. Step down." He moved slowly, like a man descending from a throne that had turned into a scaffold. Each step from the bench seemed to strip something from him. The robe swayed, suddenly less like authority and more like costume. Moreno's partner produced cuffs, federal restraints, clean metal. He guided Ketteridge's hands behind his back. Ketteridge flinched when the cuffs tightened. For the first time, his voice shook. This is humiliation." Naomi's eyes watched him, expression controlled. "It's procedure," she said quietly. "Time matters here." The words landed hard. Ketteridge twisted his head toward her, eyes wide with rage. "You're nobody." Naomi's gaze didn't waver. "That's what you needed to believe." Moreno turned to the courtroom. "This proceeding is suspended. Everyone will remain seated until we complete the arrest and secure evidence." The gallery obeyed like gravity had increased. Ketteridge was guided past Naomi. He tried to pull back to resist, but the federal agents didn't jerk him or shove him. They simply kept moving, and his resistance became a pathetic drag against inevitability. As he passed, he hissed toward Naomi, low and venomous. "You'll regret this." Naomi leaned slightly closer, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "You already did." They led him through the side door. The door clicked shut. The air didn't return to normal. It couldn't. The room had been altered. Lowell approached Naomi cautiously, as if Naomi might also be something dangerous. "Naomi, please, I need to understand." Naomi opened her folder and slid a paper across the table to Lowell. It was a federal document letterhead, case number, names. Lowell's eyes scanned, then widened. "This says," Lowell whispered. "This says you're a federal investigator?" Naomi's voice was quiet. "Special counsel investigator, assigned to the Civil Rights Division Task Force. I'm attached to the U.S. Attorney's Office for this district." Lowell's hands shook as she held the paper. "Then why did you let them?" Naomi's gaze drifted to her wrists, the red marks. "Because they only reveal themselves when they think they're safe." The prosecutor, still standing near his table, cleared his throat. His earlier confidence was gone. This is a misunderstanding." Moreno looked at him for the first time, and the prosecutor's mouth closed like a door. Moreno's tone was professional, almost gentle. "Mr. Halverson, you should remain here. We'll need to speak with you." The prosecutor's face drained. "I'm not the target." Moreno's eyes held him. Not yet is not the same as not ever. The courtroom clerk sat rigid, hands hovering over her keyboard as if it might bite. Her eyes were wet. Naomi walked toward the clerk's desk. Not fast, not slow. Controlled. The clerk's throat bobbed. "Ms. Carter, I." Naomi's voice was low, not accusing. "You marked that record restricted." The clerk swallowed. "I was told to." "By who?" Naomi asked. The clerk's eyes flicked toward the closed side door where Ketteridge had been taken. Moreno stepped beside Naomi. Presence steady. "Ma'am, lying to federal investigators is a crime. You have one chance to tell the truth." The clerk's lips trembled. "Judge Ketteridge called the office himself. He said the record contained sensitive information, and if I released it, I'd lose my job." Naomi nodded, as if she'd expected exactly that. Moreno asked, "Did he tell you what was in the record?" The clerk shook her head quickly. "No. He said it was his matter. He said it was above my pay grade." Naomi's voice remained quiet. "That record was the lien release for my father's home. The home was seized anyway. The lien was never properly released. The property was sold at auction for 40% of its value, bought by a shell LLC tied to Judge Ketteridge's brother-in-law." The clerk began to cry silently, shoulders trembling. Moreno's eyes hardened, not at the clerk, but at the machinery behind her. "We'll need full access to the clerk's office database. Now." The bailiff, still standing near the wall, found his voice. I can escort you," Moreno nodded. "Do it." Lowell stared at Naomi, struggling to reconcile the woman she'd just defended with the authority now unfolding around her. "Your father." This was personal. Naomi's gaze stayed steady, but something in her eyes thickened, like a bruise being pressed. My father died thinking he failed his family. He didn't. The system failed him. Moreno's phone buzzed. She checked it, expression tightening. Agents are securing Judge Ketteridge's chambers. They found a locked cabinet with case files, dozens. Names, photos. Naomi's breath slowed. Victims. Moreno nodded once. And evidence. The courtroom itself seemed to lean in, as if the walls were listening. The prosecutor spoke again, voice thin. If there's a federal investigation, I need to contact the district attorney. Moreno cut him off. You'll contact no one. You'll remain seated. You'll wait. He sat. The court reporter's hands hovered over the keyboard, unsure if typing was allowed. Moreno glanced at her. Keep recording. This is all part of it. The reporter nodded and began typing again, fingers moving quickly, capturing the fallout in real time. Outside in the hallway, footsteps thundered. More agents arriving, more doors opening, more locks yielding. Naomi stood still amid it all, the center of a storm she hadn't created, but had finally brought into the light. A man in a suit entered from the back older, gray hair, face lined with the tired weight of office. He flashed credentials at Moreno. She nodded. He approached Naomi, voice low and controlled. Investigator Carter. Naomi nodded. U.S. Attorney Daniels. Daniels's eyes flicked to the stunned courtroom. You got him. Naomi's voice stayed quiet. He got himself. I just stood where he could be seen. Daniels exhaled. We've been building this case for 18 months. Complaints, sealed affidavits, patterns. But juries don't feel patterns. They feel moments. Today was a moment. Naomi's jaw tightened slightly. Today was also a reminder. Daniel's gaze softened. You didn't have to do this part in person. Naomi's eyes didn't leave the bench, now empty. Yes, I did. Daniels nodded, understanding more than he said. Moreno stepped closer, voice lowered. We're getting calls already. Local media heard chatter. Someone leaked the arrest. Daniels's eyes narrowed. Lock it down. Moreno nodded. Too late. It's out. Naomi looked toward the gallery. People sat frozen, but their faces had changed. Some looked ashamed. Some looked ashamed for spectacle. Some looked relieved, like someone had finally said aloud what they had whispered for years. A woman in the back row stood slowly. She was older, black, wearing a church hat with a trembling brim. Her hands were clasped tight. Naomi turned her head. Their eyes met. The woman's lips shook. He did it to my son, she whispered, voice cracking. He gave him 6 months for a thing he didn't do. He laughed at him. He called him a thug. Her voice broke. She sank back into her seat, covering her mouth. The courtroom stayed silent, but the silence had shifted. It wasn't obedience anymore. It was something else. A collective recognition. Naomi's throat tightened. She stepped toward the woman, slow. Ma'am, she said gently, your son's case file? What's his name? The woman blinked through tears. Marcus Hill. Naomi nodded once. I'm going to write that down. She pulled a small notebook from her coat pocket and wrote it. Her handwriting was precise. Real. Daniels watched her, then spoke to Moreno. Made sure we get every sentencing transcript from Ketteridge's courtroom. We're going to need patterns, but also people. Names, lives. Moreno nodded, already in motion. The bailiff returned, breathless. Agents are at the clerk's office. They're pulling hard drives. They want. Moreno lifted a hand. Slow down. Tell them I'm coming. She turned to Naomi. You should leave. Media will be here in minutes. Naomi's gaze stayed on the empty bench. Not yet. Daniels studied her. What else? Naomi's voice lowered. He's not the only one. Daniels didn't ask if she was sure. He simply nodded. We know. Naomi's eyes moved to the prosecutor again. Halverson sat stiff, jaw clenched, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Naomi walked toward him. He stood instinctively, trying to regain some posture. Ms. Carter, I didn't know any of this. I was doing my job. Naomi stopped a few feet away, close enough to be heard, far enough not to touch. Your job isn't to win. It's to do justice. He swallowed. I did what the judge ordered. Naomi's gaze stayed fixed. You offered me probation and a no trespass order because you assumed I'd fold. You didn't ask why the record was restricted. You didn't ask why the arrest report had missing timestamps. You didn't ask why the clerk's office camera feed from that day was unavailable. Halverson's eyes flickered. That's not my. Naomi's voice stayed calm. It becomes your problem when you choose not to see. Daniel stepped beside Naomi, voice measured. Mr. Halverson, federal agents will interview you. If you have any knowledge of misconduct, now is when you cooperate. Halverson's mouth opened, then closed again. He nodded too fast. I'll cooperate. Moreno's phone buzzed again. She read, then looked up. Judge Ketteridge's chambers had a second phone line, unregistered. Agents traced calls to the clerk's office, sheriff's department, and 2 private attorneys. Daniel's expression hardened. Get subpoenas. Freeze accounts. Moreno nodded. Already drafted. Naomi exhaled slowly. The air tasted different now, less like a courtroom, more like aftermath. Outside, through the narrow windows near the back, flashing lights began to reflect faintly against the glass. Lowell approached Naomi again, voice fragile. You let him mock you. You let him. Naomi turned, and her eyes softened just slightly. Because that's how he treated people who didn't have a badge behind their name. That's how he treated people who couldn't call an agent into the room. Lowell's face tightened with shame. I didn't stop it. Naomi's voice was quiet. You tried. That matters. Lowell shook her head slowly. No, I complied. I sat down when he told me. I've sat down my whole career. Naomi looked at her, steady. Then stand up now, when the interviews happen, when the affidavits are signed, when the victims come in and their voices shake. Stand up then. Lowell's eyes filled. She nodded once, hard, as if making a promise she'd never made before. Daniels checked his watch. We need to move to the next phase. This arrest will trigger retaliation. People will delete files. People will call favors. We need to be faster than them. Naomi nodded. We will be. Moreno moved toward the aisle. Everyone will remain until a federal agent escorts you out. This building is now part of an active investigation. The gallery shifted, nervous now, but nobody argued. Naomi walked toward the center of the room again, and for a moment she looked smaller, just a woman in a plain coat with red marks on her wrists. Then she lifted her chin, and the room reoriented around her. A deputy at the door whispered something to Moreno. Moreno's eyes narrowed, then she nodded. She turned to Daniels. Sheriff's department is asking questions. They say they weren't informed. Daniels's mouth tightened. They weren't, for a reason. Naomi's eyes sharpened. Ketteridge's influence reached into the sheriff's office. Daniels nodded. We have evidence, but now we move carefully. Naomi's fingers closed around her folder again. Carefully, she echoed. And completely. A federal agent entered, murmuring to Moreno. Moreno listened, then looked to Naomi. They found a list. Naomi's face went still. What kind of list? Moreno's voice lowered. Names of defendants. Notes. Leverage. Pressure. Donation. Daniel's jaw clenched. Bribery. Naomi's eyes darkened. Extortion. Moreno nodded. And there's more. Photos. People outside courthouses. Followed. Intimidated. Lowell's hand rose to her mouth. Naomi's voice was quiet, deadly calm. He didn't just punish people in court. He hunted them outside it. Daniels's gaze held Naomi's. This becomes bigger than him. Task force expands. We bring in internal affairs, DOJ inspectors, maybe state investigators. Naomi nodded. And retell the truth to the public. Daniels hesitated, then agreed, when it doesn't compromise the arrests. Naomi's eyes shifted toward the courtroom doors again as the sound of voices grew louder in the hallway, reporters gathering like flies. Moreno stepped to block the door, speaking to an agent outside. Her posture was a barrier. Naomi turned slightly, looking at the empty bench one last time. The wood still held the imprint of Ketteridge's hands. His gavel still sat there. A symbol, suddenly powerless. She walked forward and stopped in front of the bench. She didn't touch anything. She just stood there, eyes lifted. In the silence, the court reporter kept typing. Naomi's voice was low, meant for the room. He used that gavel like a weapon. No one spoke. No one contradicted her. Naomi turned toward the gallery, eyes sweeping over faces. Some frightened, some angry, some broken, some awakened. Today, she said quietly, it's just wood and metal. Daniels watched her carefully. He didn't interrupt. He understood that this was the only kind of statement she would allow herself, one grounded in fact, not sermon. Moreno returned, nodding. We can move you out through the secure corridor. Naomi nodded once. She stepped back, and as she moved, the older woman in the church hat stood again, trembling. Miss Carter, she whispered. Naomi stopped, turned. The woman swallowed hard. Will you really fix it? Naomi's expression softened, but her voice remained steady. We will reopen cases. We will review sentencing. We will expose every person who used that bench to steal lives. The woman's eyes filled again. She nodded, clutching her purse like it was a piece of her heart. Naomi held her gaze for a moment longer, then followed Moreno and Daniels toward the side door. As Naomi stepped into the corridor, the noise of the building hit her phones ringing. Doors opening. Footsteps running. The machinery of panic had started. Moreno guided her past two agents guarding a storage room stacked with seized boxes. Labels were taped to each box. Ketteridge Chambers, Clerk Office Server, Case Files. The labels looked mundane. The contents were not. Naomi paused at one box and read a name written in marker. Her breath caught. Daniels noticed. What is it? Naomi's voice was quiet. That's my father's name. Daniels's eyes narrowed. He kept a file on your family. Naomi nodded slowly. He didn't just target strangers. He targeted anyone who could expose him. Anyone who asked questions. Moreno's jaw tightened. That's why he reacted to you like he did. He recognized the name. Naomi's eyes fixed on the box. Or he recognized what the name represented. Someone he thought he buried. Daniel's voice grew heavy. He thought the system would protect him. Naomi finally looked up. It did, she said quietly, for a long time. They moved down the corridor toward a stairwell. The walls here were bare, utilitarian. No flags, no mottos, just concrete and fluorescent lights. At the bottom of the stairs, the secure exit opened into a back parking lot. A line of unmarked federal vehicles sat with engines running. Agents moved with purposeful speed, carrying evidence bags, laptops, sealed folders. Across the lot, the courthouse's front steps were visible. Reporters had already gathered there, cameras raised. Their voices were muffled through distance. But the hunger in their posture was clear. Moreno guided Naomi toward an unmarked car. Get in. We're taking you to the office. Naomi stopped before the door opened. She looked back toward the courthouse. From this angle, the building looked grand, proud, carved stone and columns. It looked like justice. Her wrists still burned where the cuffs had been. Daniel stood beside her. Quiet. You did what you needed to do. Naomi's eyes stayed on the courthouse. I did what people without power can't do. I brought the consequence inside. Daniels nodded slowly. And now we make sure it doesn't end with one arrest. Naomi's voice was calm, controlled, but heavier now. It won't. Moreno opened the car door. Naomi slid inside, posture straight, folder on her lap. The interior smelled like leather and cold air. As the door shut, the sound of the courthouse became distant, dulled by glass and insulation, but the image remained an empty bench, a gavel left behind, and a man who had believed himself untouchable walking out in cuffs. The car pulled away, tires rolling over damp pavement. Agents continued moving in the lot, collecting what the system had tried to hide. Inside the car, Naomi rested her hands on the folder, fingers steady. Her face was composed, but her eyes held something deeper now. Not triumph, not relief. A solemn weight, like someone carrying names. The courthouse grew smaller in the rear window, stone columns receding. There would be interviews, affidavits, hearings, reopened cases, lives dragged back into courtrooms that had once chewed them up and spit them out. But today had done something rare. It had made abuse visible. It had made power accountable, and it had shown in plain procedure and irreversible consequence that the people who mocked from the bench were still just people subject to the same handcuffs, the same cold metal, the same doors closing behind them,